At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality bikes, which might lead to another discovery. Getting back on the saddle isn't always comfortable. Good news is Sierra has massage guns. And chafe wipes, too. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Welcome to
4Kids Flashback. Hello, and welcome to 4Kids Flashback. I am one of your hosts, Tara Sands, joined by
Steve Yurko.
This is the one and only podcast about the company 4Kids, in case you're just tuning in for the first time. 4Kids was the company that brought dubs like Pokémon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, One Piece, also a version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to English-speaking countries and beyond, as we're learning. We have a cool guest today. I'm super excited for this because he worked in a division of 4Kids that I don't totally understand called Summit Media. Do you really get how that fits into the bigger picture of 4Kids, Steve?
Me?
Yeah.
I just, that's the business. That's the very business side of things. We're the artsy ones.
Yeah. Yeah, no, what I haven't grasped yet is I think the enormity of this company, and Summit Media is, I believe, a subsidiary. I'm going to let him do all that talking, but he was in a different division than we've spoken to yet. So I am excited to hear his insights. He's also been really instrumental in a lot of big deal children's television shows in general. So should be a fascinating talk with Sheldon Hirsch. You might have heard him referred to on the show before. Other people call him Shelly, and in passing they would just say, "Oh, and Shelly blah blah blah," and I was like, "Who are they talking about?" And then I realized, Sheldon Hirsch. So, the man, the myth, the legend will be with us today.
The man of many name drops, or a few at least on this show.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know. It's so funny when I'm editing the show. Every time I hear a person's name get mentioned, I don't like to stop them in the middle of the interview, but then I start writing it down, and then often they'll say it really fast. And I'm like, how do you spell that? If it's a weird name or an unusual name. So I've gotten good at finding people on LinkedIn. But less about me. This has to do with both of us. So when we started this podcast with Zach, the other producer, we were like, okay, we're going to go for the idea that we're going to give every episode a very 4Kids episode title with a pun or a thing. And that has become very difficult. Zach is very good at it. But what I did recently, and I can't believe I didn't think of this sooner, I turned to our Discord for help.
And how's that been working?
Amazing. They're amazing. So if you guys don't know, we have a Discord channel affiliated with our Patreon page. So if you become a Patreon supporter, you have access to this Discord channel where people converse and talk about all kinds of stuff, share information. They know so much about 4Kids. It's amazing, but they also know about lots of other anime and just pop culture stuff. But big shout out Matthew Voss helping with the titles, and even if it's just their vote of confidence for a title I was on the fence about, it's kind of a fun place to talk about it.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Do you and some of the titles, Steve, some of them I think are yours that we've actually used on the show, right?
I think so. Yeah, there's a few of mine here or there.
Yeah. Is there one that you can take a second to look, but is there one that you're particularly, an episode title that you, even if it's not yours, that you really like?
I can't remember some of mine that were actually picked.
Well, they could be any. I know that, I'm trying to think. I think my two favorites so far are You Say Tomato, I Say Tomato for Greg Abbey, and Tama Faye Baker for Andrew Rannells. Those are, I think, my two favorites as of now.
Oh, Sam Riegel's Critical Rex. I remember that was one we were scratching our heads about.
Oh, yeah.
We got there.
Yeah, sometimes it's not about, who comes up with it. It's, the back and forth that sparks something in one of us that's oh, I got it, because the other person led them down, a path.
A real think tank.
It's a real think tank, but it makes me envious for people who are in writers' rooms, because I think that must just be so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we are a writer's room by any means.
No.
But more importantly, Sheldon Hirsch has entered our Zoom waiting room, and we are not going to make him wait any longer. So without further ado, here is an interview for you. That rhymed. See what I did there? Our guest today, like I said in the intro, worked in a division of 4Kids that we have not gotten to talk a lot about, called Summit Media. I am excited to hear about the overall structure of the company and how all these different pieces fit together. He's also responsible for bringing major shows that you guys all know and love to children's television, and just has a really amazing career in this field. So welcome to the show, Sheldon Hirsch. Shelly Hirsch. I'm sorry. I've already forgotten to call you Shelly. Yes.
Shelly Hirsch.
Welcome to the show.
You might have to start all over from the beginning.
I won't make you sit through that. So thank you for being here, Shelly.
Okay.
Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So I guess we should start in the beginning, because I looked at your resume, and some of your early jobs seem to overlap with some of the IP, the intellectual property that 4Kids / it was called LIC at that time. So can you sort of just walk us through how all these pieces fit together?
Sure. I was known as the toy media maven in the kids business in the mid-'60s through 2005, 2010, when I decided to exit from 4Kids. I basically started as a media buyer working for an advertising agency.
Can you explain what a media buyer is, just for our people listening?
A media buyer is someone who negotiates with either networks or local stations to buy media inventory, program time for clients. And I was lucky enough to be there during the Renaissance period of the kid advertising, television, primary medium to get the message across. And I started with an advertising agency that had a toy account called Kona Brothers. Kona had Pop-O-Matic. And the way I got the job, I was working for Dick Cavett, believe it or not, on the Dick Cavett show.
Wow.
And I met somebody in the audience. I was in college. And he said, come see me. I went to see him. And he said, what do you know about kids? I said, I was a kid once. And he said, good enough. And he said, we'll train you. And I learned how to buy media specifically in the children's arena, which was a very, very specialized arena, because it wasn't done the same way that, say, you were Procter & Gamble and you were looking to put Charmin on the air. With the kids' media, you bought bulk inventory and initially, and then you parceled it out to your various clients. And it was very lucrative. I was 27 years old. I was made partner in an advertising agency called Richard and Edwards. And they had two primary accounts. We had Coleco Industries, which was known for the Cabbage Patch Kids and ColecoVision and electronic head-to-head, whatever. And we did the creative for the Ideal Toy Corporation. So we actually created product and we positioned product. So we did our first major success was a doll called Rubber Dub Dolly.
Oh,
it was the first bathtub doll. And I could sing the song, Rubber Dub Dolly, Sweet Dolly, and it's, two in the tub is more fun than one. And we launched this. I had two other partners, Dick Schwarzschild and Ed Mandel. They were 25 years older than me. And we launched Rubber Dub Dolly. And then Coleco came to us and they said, what can you do with a handheld game called Electronic Quarterback? And we said, well, Mattel has an electronic quarterback, and let's take a look at yours. And we basically decided that the best way to attack Mattel's product was to do something that was unconventional, which is actually do a comparison of both products in a commercial. So we basically put their product down at the expense of bringing our product up. And within a very short time, due to expert media buying on my part, I take credit for that now, we basically blew Mattel out of the water.
So the first smear campaign was born, basically.
We talked to kids and we said, listen, why buy that junk when you could have this? And the way we did it is we had two characters that were in costumes that looked just like the electronic games, only their head and their arms are out. And one character said, I'm an electronic quarterback for Mattel and I can run. And the Coleco guy said, you can run, I could pass. And they go, you could pass? I can't do that. And I go, I could kick, you could kick, I can't do that. So we basically put Mattel's product was far inferior and Coleco's product was the same price, same price. And that kind of launched us. And from that point on, we were then contacted by other small toy manufacturers and said, what can you do for us? So from 1976 to 1987, Richard and Edwards was the premier creative and media agency in the kids space, opposite Mattel's agency, which was in California, and Ideal's media buying agency, which is an agency called Health Got Town in Silverstein, which then became Town Rodder in Silverstein, etc. All of the other small toy manufacturers came to us because of our media buying expertise. What we were able to do was put all of these smaller companies' budgets together and negotiate from a position of strength versus, you had 100,000, he had 200,000, Mattel had 10 million. And so we basically amassed 12 million to go up against Mattel's 10 million and Ideal's 8 million. And we then also on the creative side, we basically came up with the strategy for a product called the Cabbage Patch Kids. And at that time, we also brought in two additional partners, a guy named Steve Kolker and a guy named Lenny Leokum. Both of them, unfortunately, are deceased. Steve was a genius. He came from Procter & Gamble's agency, and he just knew what to do. And with the Cabbage Patch Kids, after all the research we did, and all the research on the doll was negative.
Wow.
The Catholic Church was against us. How can you do adoption? How can you adopt something? And the dolls were pretty much ugly, And
I mean, compared to what the going doll was, these were not
compared to
dolls.
Betsy Wetsy or compared to any of the promotional dolls. The Cabbage Patch Kids, first of all, they were soft. They had a hard face. They had a dimple, but every one of them was different. And that was the unique selling proposition. 90% of your life is luck and 10% is smarts. And we just happened to be lucky because one of the people that we met at Ideal, who was running the doll division, was a guy named Artie Alper. And he had come back from China with a matrix. And the matrix was what would allow you to make individual dolls different. So no two dolls would be alike. So when you bought Betsy Wetsy, every Betsy Wetsy or Tiny Tears was exactly the same. Mm-hmm. Cabbage Patch Kids were all different. And Steve came up with this, mantra. I'm a one of a kind. I'm a Cabbage Patch Kid. There's nobody else like me. Mm-hmm. And
I remember this.
And we positioned every doll in the box with the hands out like, hold me. And they came with a birth certificate. And overnight, we created this phenomenon for Coleco. They didn't even know what they had on their hands. I remember at a toy fair, I was sitting in a room with the two principals of Coleco, Arnold Greenberg and Leonard Greenberg. And the wholesale price prior to the Cabbage Patch Kids of all promotional dolls was $8.90. And those dolls were sold for $9.99 because they were loss leader. Mm-hmm. In one day, the Cabbage Patch Kids went from $8.90 to $10.90 to to 12.90 to 14.90 to 17.90 to 21.90. I will never forget that. And Charles Lazarus of Toys R Us came into the Coleco showroom and said, "I don't care what they cost. How many can you make?" And
how fast?
Greenberg,
Yeah, how fast can you do?
And Arnold was one of the greatest, smartest bullshit artists on the planet. Said, "I can make 3 million," and Charles said, "I'll take them all."
Wow.
And that launched it. And so for 4 years, the Cabbage Patch Kids kind of carried Coleco, but they also ventured off into other, kinds of products like ColecoVision. And ColecoVision we positioned very differently, because at the time, Atari had their 64 version, and Mattel had Intellivision. And here comes Coleco, who was really not expert in the electronics business. And so they came to us and said, "Well, what would you do?" We said, "What we would do is, number one, can you make an adapter that we could hook up to ColecoVision that allows you to play the Mattel and the Intellivision games?" And they, "I don't know, we'll check it out." They came back to us, they said, "Yeah, we could do that." And then we said, "You want to do something really ballsy?" And they said, "What's that?" I said, "Go to Japan and get the #1 video game license." At the time, it was Donkey Kong. And we said, "Okay, load it with ColecoVision. Don't sell it separately. Put it in the box."
Yep.
And that will put them over the top. Within a short period of time, Coleco was the front runner. Our vision was your vision. We hired a guy named John Dykstra, who did all of the special effects for Star Wars, who did the special effects for Coleco. We spent a fortune in doing, creative, and it worked.
Wow.
But like all good things, they come to an end. In 1987, Coleco manufactured too many Cabbage Patch Kids, and they got greedy, and they went away. And so my two partners, who are much older than me, Dick and Ed, Dick was 60 and Ed was like 62. They said, they're going to cash out and retire. And I was young. And Steve and Lenny decided they were going to become a creative boutique. I moved to California and I went to work for an agency called Sachs Finley. Jerry Sachs was, the premier, go-to guy if you wanted to do business in Asia. Specifically in Japan. Jerry moved to California from New York City in 1960, moved to Santa Monica, and started traveling to Japan, and basically was very, very observant, on how to do business with the Japanese, not to be the giant American that eats everything. Listen to them, give them, wiggle room to get out of a, bad situation, gain their trust, never ask for the order. Whenever they're ready, they'll come to you. And so Jerry basically cornered two very, very big Japanese toy companies, Bandai and Tomy. And they were competitors, and they allowed Jerry to handle both of them. And Jerry, also at the time picked up, in 1987, he picked up a client from Hong Kong called Playmates. And they came out with the, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is where I came in. And Jerry and I went across the country selling the show to every television station that would take it. And the way we sold it is we used Playmates' advertising budget as kind of a kicker. You take our show, we'll give you 2 minutes, a half hour, and we'll spend X number of dollars on your air over the course of X period of time. And, we launched the show. It launched, semi-successfully, but in the spring of the first year that the Turtles came out, they decided to do a full-length action movie, and that basically took that to the next level.
Right.
But Jerry, and I lived in Jerry's house for a year. My family was in New York. I would go back. I would spend a weekend, and a week in LA, and then I'd fly back Friday night on a red eye to New York to see my family for a week. And then I go back to LA, and Jerry, I was his playmate. He was older than me. And I learned the most significant thing I learned from Jerry was 2 fingers. Know what 2 fingers are? That's the first shot of scotch you pour into the glass. And so every night
Right.
we would drink, and then we would call Asia. That night we would call either Asia or Australia to see what was cooking. And Jerry took me to Japan numerous times, and I met with all of the heads of all of the large Japanese toy companies. And the one condition was keep your mouth shut and just listen. And I listened, and over time, I was able to meet a number of the licensing agents that were owned by these Japanese company. And I had good experience. And then Jerry and I had a falling out. I came back to New York. Al Kahn, who was my client at Coleco,
Right.
Al was basically let go the same day we were let go. And Al went to work for a licensing company called Leisure Concepts, which was owned by a guy named Stan Weston. And they were a fledgling licensing company. They had things like Charlie Chan, which sounded good but didn't mean squat, and others. And Leisure Concepts was owned silently by a company called Tiger Electronics. Tiger, who was Furby and the Talk Boy. Tiger was the principal shareholder of Leisure Concepts. And Randy Rissman, who was the principal, Randy Rissman and Roger Schiffman were the two go-to guys. They were basically running Tiger. They told Al to find me, bring my expertise in from the standpoint of distributing television shows, because at that point in history, all of the toy companies were getting behind TV shows. G.I. Joe is, from Hasbro, and, Mattel, not so much, but a number of toy manufacturers. Galoob got behind
Cabbage Patch Kid had a show. Yeah.
There was Treasure Trolls and what have you.
Okay, now for the lightning round.
I'm so good at lightning rounds. That's from Friends. It's my favorite show.
20 seconds on the clock starts now. Who is the captain of the USS Enterprise?
Oh, crap. Is it, Captain Stubing? No, Morgan? Crunch?
Next question. Which superhero is Tony Stark?
Stark. Did Game of Thrones have superheroes? I only watched 2 episodes.
What planet were Luke and Leia born on?
Planet Fitness?
Oh, time's up. Sorry. And now, a word from our sponsor.
Hey everybody, Mandy Kaplan here. Please check out my podcast, Make Me a Nerd, where each week an incredible guest tries to baptize this mainstream mom into the world of sci-fi, fantasy, and all things nerdy. Available wherever you podcast.
That's our show, folks.
Wait, I just thought of it. Padme Amidala gave birth to her twins Luke and Leia on Polis Massa. No, that's dumb. Is it Planet Hollywood?
Anyway, so they bring me in, and what Randy Rissman said, listen, I have the Tiger Electronic advertising budget. Use that to see these television stations. And I want you to also go out with my help, and we'll bring in all these small toy manufacturers. So within 2 years, we became the largest media buying entity in the toy business. We spent more money. We spent more money on TV than Hasbro and Mattel combined. And that gave us, not only buying power from the standpoint of rate advantage, but that gave us an ear at every television station when we brought them concepts. And so, and Randy said, listen, you don't have to just do my stuff. Go find other shows. I met a guy whose name is Dan Kletsky. Kletsky was a licensing agent, and he had a company that represented Ultraman, which was Capcom. And Dan came to me and said, listen, I want you to go to Japan with me. I want you to meet the head of Capcom, and I want you to pitch him and tell him what we could do for Ultraman. So not Ultraman, Mega Man, excuse me. It was Mega Man. Ultraman was Subaraya. That was another show we did.
Right.
So we did Ultraman and Mega Man. Went to
Yes.
Japan, brought back Mega Man, got it on the air. It was reasonably successful. And then out of the woodwork, everyone was now coming to us, other than Mattel and Hasbro, and because they felt that they had to be the big elephant in the room, and they didn't like to be with other ducks and other chickens. They wanted to be and so we said, okay, have it your way. And so Summit Media was born as a media buying entity and a distribution company. And I had access, to most of the Japanese licensing companies. And then one day, now 4Kids at that time, they changed it to 4Kids from Leisure Concepts.
Mm-hmm.
One of 4Kids licensors was Nintendo. And they did Super Mario, and they did Donkey Kong and a number of other Nintendo properties. And I get a phone call from one of my licensing friends in Japan who said he wants me to come to Tokyo, bring my associate, whose name was Tom Kenny, and do you know Al Khan? I said, yeah, he's big boss here. He said, bring him too. So the three of us get on an airplane, we go to Japan, and they presented us with a video cassette of Pokemon. And we said, what's this? And they said, it's Pokemon. And from my discipline with Jerry Sachs, the first question you ask is, how important is it in Japan? And they go, good question. Right now, yeah, we do equivalent of maybe $5 billion US. Our eyeballs.
Significant. Yes.
We said, really? And so we get back on a plane, come back to New York with a cassette in Japanese. We don't know what to do with it. We give it to our in-house producer. His name was Norman Grossfeld. Mm-hmm. And Norman brings it to his son, who was about 5 at the time. And his son watched it, understood everything, even though it was in Japanese. And then we get called by Hamachi, the head of Nintendo, to come and talk about Pokemon. What are we going to do with it? And we went to him and we said, listen, what you need to do with this, and again, because of my association with Jerry Sachs, who said that typical Japanese anime on its own would be very difficult to succeed. And what you need to do is you need to alter the shows to westernize them without insulting the integrity of the author.
Interesting.
And so, that was like drilled into me. Went to see him much, and he said, what do you think? And we said, what we think is we need to do certain changes, minor changes, that will allow Western children to familiarize themselves with what's going on. He goes, like what? I said, in Japan, you live in villages. In the Western world, we live in cities and towns. He goes, okay. Your signage in the animation is in Japanese. What does that mean? We would like to go in and rewrite the signs. Bear left, go right. Stop, railroad crossing. He goes, now, okay, what's this going to cost? We said, what we need to do is we need to bring in some experts, Westerners like us, who are experts in Japanese, to read the scripts and to alter them for Western tastes without upsetting your author. And he said, okay, but what's it going to cost? We told him it's going to cost about $75,000 an episode. He said, that's all? We said, yes. He said, okay, just do me one favor. What's that? Don't fail. And so we brought back, Pokemon. And what we did is we hired a number of Mormons who had done their mission in Japan.
Paul Taylor, who was a translator for you guys, right?
That's where we found him.
Yep.
And he was one of the Mormon missionaries. We gave him the scripts. They, the Japanese loved them because, they were not disrespectful when they were in Japan. And now we had the task of getting it on the air. And that wasn't so easy. And now the one mistake that Al Khan made, which at the end of the day really wasn't the mistake, but it was a mistake, is Al was looking for the biggest advance and the biggest royalty from the biggest toy manufacturer. And our position was, why don't we, this thing is going to be a home run. Why don't we just find someone who's hungry and who could finance, whatever it needs to be done. And Al, you couldn't talk to him. Al had an ego, still has an ego.
Al's Al.
Yeah. And I love the guy. He's very smart. But he went ahead with giving the master license to Hasbro. But unknowns to Al, at the same time, Hasbro had renegotiated their Star Wars license with Lucas. And they were going to re-release Star Wars, the animated series. And they gave Lucas, warrants in Hasbro stock. So Hasbro had to really put all of their efforts behind Star Wars. And they couldn't allow, Pokemon to succeed. The only one at Hasbro who wanted it to succeed was Alan Hasselfeld. Everyone else was against it. And so when we went into the marketplace to basically place the show, Hasbro had their own programming, and they were there fighting with us for the limited available positions that were out there. And so in some cases, like New York, we had to launch the show at 6:30 in the morning, which was like the kiss of death. But even at 6:30 in the morning, even at 6:30, within 2 weeks, it blew everything out of the water. And nobody understood why. The show was basically Lassie Come Home with,
some episodes,
if you think about it,
for sure.
Yeah.
It was Lassie Come Home with 180 collectible, whatever they were. And it reached kids on so many levels that was beyond comprehension. And all of us would sit there and take all the credit. Yeah, we knew all of this.
Right.
We would, Toys R Us used to set up tables in their stores and have these Pokemon, Saturday morning events where kids would come in and basically discuss Pokemon. And we had letters from parents who had autistic children. And for the first time in their life, they were engaged outside of their, the shroud that they were living in.
We weren't saying autistic at the time, but now, today, when I go to these conventions, I'm meeting so many wonderful children on the spectrum. I had this experience with this nonverbal autistic child, but he could say the names of the Pokemon.
And now
I'm getting chills.
He intimately knew them. Intimately knew them. And so
there's something about this show, and we go back to this all the time, and you're a perfect person to talk to this about. It's this, maybe it's the design and the artwork of these creatures, or the empowerment it gives children, or something magical X factor about this show that I don't think adults, people who first saw it as adults, will ever understand.
It had wonderful stories that was simple, with basically primary colors, not a lot of frenetic motion, and you were on a journey. You were follow the yellow brick road. And the game was rock, paper, scissors, if you think about it. The Pokemon game. It was a takeoff on rock, paper, scissors. And so we launched Pokemon. It blew everything out of the water. And the first year we syndicated, which meant that we went market to market, station to station. We didn't, do any network deal. The networks would, if we would have brought it to the networks, they'd have laughed at us, because that's not the way, the kind of animation that they felt that, their networks, demanded. And so the first year we knocked it out of the park. The second year, when we went to renew our contracts, a couple of the stations got greedy. And they said, one in LA, in particular, KCOP, they basically came to us and they said, listen, you gave us X number of dollars, in advertising. We want 3 times that amount, or else we're going to run, Bishop Fulton J. Sheen religion instead of, and so they blackmailed us. And, and we said, really? And so at that point, we had to basically come up with another strategy. And, and at that time, there were 2 fledgling networks that were coming on board. Fox Kids, which was helmed by Chaim Saban, who was a good friend of mine, and the Kids WB. And, went to NAPTY in New Orleans, and Chaim called a meeting with he and Rupert Murdoch. Wanted Al Kahn and me to take a meeting. Al chickened out and said, "You take it." And so, thank you. And so I took a meeting with Chaim and Rupert, and they basically said, they would like to take the show. But I said, it comes down to taking the show. The Fox Kids runs from 2 to 5 p.m. We can't run between 2 and 3. It's the kiss of death. And we know that your shows that, you own the licensing run between 3 and 5. We have to have one of those half hours. And be disrespectful, but, it's a deal breaker. At the same time...
Well, and this is because children are not home from school yet?
Exactly.
Is that
exactly.
why? Okay. I just wanted to make sure we're all clear,
Well, the kids that were home were preschoolers. And,
and it's not your audience.
At the time, it wasn't particularly our audience. Although it basically transcended down to, preschoolers at one particular point. The Kids WB, I had very, very good relationship with a number of the executives, at Kids WB. And a guy named Carl Kiekenmeister, who was running the Kids WB ad sales, I approached him. I said, "Carl, what if I gave you Pokemon?" And he said, "Don't BS me." I said, "No. What if I brought you Pokemon? Could you introduce me to Jamie Kellner?" Because I didn't know Jamie at the Kids WB. And let's see if we could make what we say in Yiddish, a shidduch, a marriage. Mm-hmm. And Carl said, "I don't know what you just said." All right.
And your secret language.
Right. And so in New Orleans, Jamie Kellner came to meet us, in one of the hotels. And we basically pitched to him. And he said, "I don't know very much about it, other than the fact that I spent $200,000 an episode doing the, Historia, an animation. And this cartoon of yours, this animation, which cost about 15 cents to produce, is eating my lunch. Why?"
Right.
And we said, we don't know, but take advantage of the situation. We'll give this to you. We will ensure that our clients support the Kids WB. But once again, you got to give us a window where this thing could, basically shine, because we now have to go back to 160 stations and disappoint them that we're taking the show off of their air, and moving the show to the Kids WB. And we consummated the deal. Jamie said, okay. Chaim was totally furious, that and I said, "Chaim, you're gonna run it at 2:00, because as much as you wanted this to work, you didn't want it to work. Because come on, you were protecting the Power Rangers, and you were protecting whatever else that you had in your, repertoire, and we would have been, whatever." And before we closed the deal with Jamie, Al and Joe Garrity, who was our CFO, they left the room. I said, "Jamie, I'll make this happen for you with one caveat." He goes, "What's that?" I said, "The next show that we bring to you, you have to take. You have to. So you're going to get this, and I'm going to get another show. And I mean, if it's a dud, I won't bring it to you, and we'll send it out. It has to be something that's reasonably good." And so the next show we brought to him was Yu-Gi-Oh!
That's right. Wow. Two winners. Yeah.
Yeah, and within less than a month, the Kids WB surpassed ABC and NBC and CBS on Saturday morning. And we also put Pokemon in their afternoon block. And, for a reasonable period of time, Pokemon was, the winner. And this ran up until the year 2005. And what happened is everybody got greedy. 4Kids stock went from 60 cents a share to $100. A number of us, prospered by it, me being one of them. And, and then, bad marriages start to, fall apart. I got sick, unfortunately.
Oh.
I needed open heart surgery. I needed bypass. And
Oh my
so in
gosh.
2005, I went in for bypass surgery and I came out. I was I stayed away for 3 months and I basically had time to say, listen, I'm not going to go back to be miserable. Thank God I don't have to worry. And I'll figure out the next move.
In retrospect, like when I was looking at your resume, and I said, "Oh, 2005, he left. That was a smart time to go." But it wasn't
It really
necessarily
wasn't. It
calculated
wasn't.
like that.
We could have kept Summit going longer. And so
Okay.
I left Summit, and a guy named Jack Friedman, who was with LJN at the time, and Jack called me and said, "You can't quit." And Russ Hornsby was Trendmasters. He called me and said, "You can't quit. What are we going to do?"
Yeah.
I said, listen, I can't. I'm done. I'm cooked. And so Jack Friedman and Avi Arad and Russ Hornsby cornered me and said, listen, start something new. We'll back you if you need money. And we'll call, you don't be the front because Al will be vicious and sue you. We'll call all of the other clients who will, basically come on board and we'll start another company, just come up with a name. So we came up with Beacon, and Beacon Media was formed. Al was pissed, but, Al unfortunately let my contract expire. So he had no,
Wow. Yeah.
no legal. And on top of that, a number of the key employees at Summit, walked out and they basically went through the back door with me. And we started Beacon and we had, from 2006 to 2017, when I retired, another 10 great years of media.
I feel like you're the Forrest Gump of children's television. I feel like you've been there at the beginning of so many of these huge shows.
But what the difference was, we were Peter Pan. We were a bunch of kids that never grew up, and we looked at toys, differently than an adult would look at toys. We looked at and a key selling point. And what I learned in advertising to children is that kids don't have fungible dollars. They don't have, money that they can go out and buy. They have to form an opinion and basically take that opinion to someone else and have that person, when that person is ready, an adult. So it's not, impulse buying, although some toys are impulse. And you got to basically, figure it out, and you got to be patient. And we had a great rapport with all of these clients. We gave them 100% of the attention that they needed, even though they were small. And they would all say, "Listen, I don't spend nearly as much money as MGA or as much as Spin Master." And I would remind them that Spin Master came to us with a budget of $10,000 first. And then we basically built Spin Masters from $10,000 to $40 million. And I say, we built it. Yeah, they took the risk, but we came up with the strategy.
Right.
And, and we got paid for it. We were handsomely paid. We never complained. Same thing with MGA. Isaac came to us, and Bratz was reasonably successful. And we said, listen, what we could do for you with Bratz is, right now you're spending what? He said, I spend $5 million a year. Well, we'll do that same. We'll spend the $5 million that you have for $3 million, because that's the clout that we have with the media. We were able to buy bulk media, although it's illegal to buy bulk media. We were committing dollars that we knew we could find without signing any kind of contracts. And
so you had to. Oh, I see. So was it called a bulk media buy, and then that became illegal, or it was never called that?
No, no. It was called. We committed X number of dollars, and in the beginning, a toy retailer was the banker. So Toys R Us or Child World, Children's Palace, were the two basic bankers to go to the television station and say, listen, we'll guarantee that this expenditure whether it's through the toy manufacturers that, these guys have, or our own money. If we say we're going to spend $400,000 between X and Y, you're going to get the $400,000. And we never missed a beat. And that's why these stations felt confident, in doing business with us. And, a lot of them were pissed off with Pokemon, but, money talks, and everybody got over it. And that's what happened. And, also my role at 4Kids was I was an advisor to Al, because Al and I were pretty much the same age. We liked the same things. And Al would bounce his ideas off of me, and I wasn't afraid to say, nah. And because many of the people there were yes men, and I wasn't a yes man.
He needed that.
I said, because you don't like what I have to say. I was on the 3rd floor. You're on the 6th floor. Basically, send me down to the 3rd floor, and I'll keep my mouth shut. No. What do you think? And in some cases, some of the licensees that Al would give licenses to, it came down to they were our clients. And how do you play King Solomon?
Right.
You're going to piss the client off. He's going to leave you. And we had to use kid gloves to basically appease, the winner and not insult the loser. We gave it something else. Sometimes the something else was better than the initial license.
Right. Well, I was going to say, once Pokemon got so big, did some of those other properties fall by the wayside? Where was the company's focus at that time? Because they still had things like Donkey Kong and Kirby and all these other things.
Well, remember, Pokemon was owned by Nintendo.
Right. So they were going to stay.
They were, Nintendo got pissed off because we were making too much money. And they were jealous that, they gave us this piece of gold and we turned it into platinum. And they now had a lot of conflict in dealing with the Pokemon people. And they threatened to, basically, we don't need you anymore. We'll take it and do it ourselves. By that point, I was gone. I wasn't going to, it was as easy as it sounded. The stress was unbelievable. The traveling, you had to go twice a year to Europe, to MIPCON, had to go to Hong Kong twice a year, had to go to Japan 4 or 5 times a year. I had a family with 3 kids, and it's
a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. And I had bad genes, to boot. I got lucky that the Widowmaker didn't take.
Yeah.
So.
Something that you just reminded me of is we had heard that Pokemon took off so fast that the toys were not ready. So there was a lag.
Wait, it gets better.
Oh, sorry, go on. Yeah.
Hasbro, in their infinite wisdom to kill it, would basically ship in a box of, say, they're 24 pieces. They would ship 18 of the same piece and 6.
Oh.
So they were basically overloading because they wanted it to die. Alan Hassenfeld didn't. Everyone else there did, because, and under those horrible circumstances, it still worked. On the manufacturing side, what Hasbro wound up doing is in Japan, Tomy was making the Pokemon character figures. So Tomy basically was shipping Hasbro, was manufacturing figures for Hasbro.
Oh.
Yeah.
So we were able to, we never filled the marketplace to what it could really call for. But on the other hand, the trading cards really were the linchpin. Mm-hmm. And we had 2 companies. We had Wizards of the Coast and we had the Topps Corporation. Both, that good old Al figured out how we could give the same license to 2 people and make it different. But he did. That's his genius. That was his genius.
That is shocking still to me.
That was his genius. I had, oh God, if you only knew what happened. I had as a gift, I had all 180 cards before they cut them into cards and sheets.
Oh, the big sheet.
And from Topps and from
Oh my God.
From Wizards of the Coast. I had them hanging in my basement. And when we moved from our home, when our kids grew up and they left, and my wife and I decided that we were going to move into Manhattan, we had all of this stuff that we accumulated. My wife put these two posters outside. Oh. And I swear there's a guy driving around our old development in a Bentley.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And right now I have a 5-year-old grandson who is consumed by Pokemon. Oh. Imagine if I would have had that.
No, well, he would have just cut it up and been excited about that. So you couldn't have let him near that.
And that's our story. Wow. We went from worst to first, and it was a fun ride at times. It was a nightmare at times, and thank God that there was a good number of us that walked away, better than where we started.
Yeah. Steve, you had a question. Sorry, I didn't mean to
cut. Couple things. Go ahead. Talking about this Hasbro and Pokemon deal. Did Hasbro ever kind of come around and kind of realize that, we're kind of being stubborn here, we should really push this? Because I do remember those toys being really hard to get when things started blowing up. I remember Christmas of '98, nothing. But I remember December 26th of '98 going to a Toys R Us and it was fully stocked. Every possible item available was there. And I remember snatching those up. I was just curious if around that time.
I think what happened is they had to. They had to. Demand.
Yeah.
When Charles Lazarus, or Sid Schneider of Child World called you up and said, I need, X number of pieces to make my year. And I don't care if you have to fly him in on a flying elephant on Dumbo. I want him. I don't care what you have to do to get him to me. You better get him to me because I have a very big pencil. And Hasbro being a public company had to do what was right for their shareholders. And so they did come around. They had to come around.
Now, when you talk about all this advertising stuff, we've gotten into some of these rules about advertising to children. So I'm sure you know just so much about that and the changes in the industry that you saw. You can't run a Yu-Gi-Oh toy commercial during Yu-Gi-Oh.
You were never able to do that. You really were never able to do that.
So even in the 60s, that was a thing.
In the 60s, things were kind of different. The way they got around it is when you sit, on the networks had, spots that they'd run in the show. And then on the half hour was known as the adjacencies. And that's how they got around it. So they could run adjacent to a show, the product of the show, or after the show, the product of the show. So they got around it. In syndication, you basically, we had 2 minutes to sell and the stations had 3 minutes to sell. And we basically stuck by the NAB rules, and we didn't want to get cited, and it didn't really pay, Mm-hmm. And so we basically never tried to pull a fast one, advertise a product in the show that the show is about. But in the shows themselves, we wrote in all of the products. If you think about it, all of these episodes had all of the products that were going to become toys.
Right, but Yu-Gi-Oh made them change the back of the card to not look exactly like the card. So was there a lot of that going on, or was that just kind of a Yu-Gi-Oh thing?
I don't remember that, to be honest with you. It could have been a Yu-Gi-Oh thing. But toys themselves, the mannequins,
mm-hmm.
The mannequins, and the vehicles were all written into the shows because kids over time, especially in the mid to late 60s, they lost their imagination. So if you gave a kid a nail and a hammer, he wouldn't know what to do with it. And so you had to basically show them in the animation. Here's the nail, punk, punk, punk. And so you had to show them how to play with the product, how to integrate the toys into the episode, into the narrative. And so we were very good at that. So we knew, months in advance what the toy lines were going to be. And so the animation, was basically, running narrative based on the toys that were going to come out.
Right. We learned the word toyetic on this podcast because it's, how many, it's less about the show often than how many toys it sells. But that seems to have become a phenomenon that's just exploded, where literally in pitch meetings, people are showing toys now. What have you seen in terms of that and the changes to the industry?
The biggest change that I see is, and again, and luck be a lady tonight. When I retired in 2017, 18, the whole kids media business radically changed. It changed from, the Saturday morning networks, basically NBC, CBS, and ABC. I think ABC stuck it out. CBS and NBC got out of it. The Kids WB was hanging in there. Fox was hanging in there. But, the spoiler was Nickelodeon and the Cartoon Network. They were, for lack of a better word, they were 24/7 kid entities. And then you had the Disney Channel, which is by subscription. And then Disney had an offshoot called, I forget what the Disney had also a streaming or cable.
Oh, just two. They had more than one.
I think it was Disney XD. It was called.
Yeah.
So they would run, old Disney stuff. The current Disney stuff, the sitcoms, they were run on the Disney Channel. But Nickelodeon became the gold standard because of Double Dare, and that they were on at times other than 7 to 9 in the morning or 6 in the morning. And
no more appointment television.
Right.
Yeah, appointment television was gone.
And then what ultimately happened, Nickelodeon became greedy, and they didn't acknowledge another entity coming in called YouTube. And YouTube brought in thousands of programs, animated, non-animated, that kids could go to rather than watching the reruns on Nickelodeon or the Cartoon Network. Unfortunately, the Cartoon Network was never very serious about what they had. And they had the best library, if you think about Hanna-Barbera.
Oh, yeah.
They never were able, because they were never able to tap into, Yogi Bear and Magilla Gorilla. That was relegated to an offshoot, WB network. And, they were interested only in Batman. And then both this, the Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon would make a limited number of episodes. And then when they, the fall came out, what they did is the show that ran at 3, they now ran it at 5. The show that ran at 5 was now at 2. They just basically rearranged, the puzzle. But in the past, you were able to get away with it because that was the only place that kids had to go to. When YouTube came about, kids said, I don't need that. And what the kids wound up doing is depending more and more on YouTube. And then the influencers came into the picture. And these little kids, little pitchmen were out selling their wares.
Crazy.
And here's where we are today. Nickelodeon, when I left, Nickelodeon was averaging about a 3-kid rating. A 3-kid rating is about 1.5 million kids per half hour. Now they average, I think, about a 0.3. And
because of too much competition, nobody can get numbers anymore.
And because the ratings are so low, these kids are now dependent on going to apps and and there's 12,000 apps, and these kids aren't going to all 12,000. There's not enough areas where the kids can look at advertising and form an opinion anymore. So right now, why the toy business is basically on a downslide is that kids can't form an opinion. They can't go to the schoolyard to see what the other kids want because they're in the same boat, and many kids watch on demand, which in many cases only have a commercial going in and going out. The rest of the show is, and you have the remote that you say, I don't want to watch that anymore, or I want to speed it up. So we're in a
You have
different world.
3-year-olds understanding the Apple TV remote. I mean, it's
Well, yeah.
insane. Yeah.
The next thing that happened is that we always used to coin a phrase called kids are getting older younger. And so in the 60s, the toy business basically was kids 4 to 12, 4 to 11. And then it started, basically shrinking. And now the toy business, the real solid toy business, is 4 to 7, 4 to 8, because the older kids are into their iPads. So they're into, and many of them
It's
are
video games. Yeah.
they're doing video games, or they're
Yeah.
playing voice games with their friends. They're not into toys the way they were when they were younger. And so, there's 1.5 million kids in every year. So there's 1.5 million 3-year-olds, 1.5 million 4-year-olds, 1.5 million 5-year-olds. At one time, you had 10 million kids to basically as prospects. Now you have half of that. So it's a much harder job for a toy manufacturer.
I have to ask, since you were so instrumental in bringing Pokemon over, were you also instrumental with the other shows, like One Piece, or making these decisions, or are there any shows that you were like, we should definitely not do that, or this is a hit, and then it didn't work out?
What was
your experience?
One of my frustrations at 4Kids is I was closeted. So they wanted to make the decisions on One Piece, and I found out about it after the fact, because I wasn't there to find it, or I wasn't instrumental in bringing it to them, and the principles behind those concepts didn't know me, and therefore 4Kids didn't need me. So I went down to the 3rd floor, and I was, I had my media business to run, but it did take its effect on me. It did, you wanted when you wanted, and you not wanted when you're not wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, business. And like you can say, well, business is business, but we still have feelings, and we still are humans.
I was involved with Cubics. That was one of Al's properties that I believe that we sold. It should have worked. Why it didn't work, I don't know. Maybe there was other competition, and some of the other things that they came a point where they were so desperate, they were grasping for straws, and they basically pissed off Norman, and they pissed off a number of the other people, and Al basically severed his relationship with Joe Garrity, and Joe was the calming force in the room. Joe would basically listen. Joe was a great listener, and listened, and was the one who, at the end of the day, when everyone left, I don't know if you knew Sam Newborn, who was the in-house counsel. Sam and Joe were the calming forces. But when Al got something in his head, it was in his head. You couldn't talk to him. Whatever. A lot of jealousy. There was lots of stupid jealousies that went down, and whatever.
Yeah, there seems to be a soap opera that we were not, especially as a voice actor. There's a soap opera going on behind the scenes that I certainly wasn't aware of.
Yeah.
Oh. So, it could make a good book one day.
You were called in. He gave you your script, and Yeah. And Al never gave Norman the credit that Norman deserved, because Norman was really, Norman was 2 seconds from being fired when Pokémon came in. Yeah, Al was, Al had screwed something up, blamed Norman, was going to fire Norman. Oh. And we came back with the cassette, we gave it to Norman, Norman came back, and it was like, God looked down and anointed Norman, and Norman, deservedly so, did all of the real legwork. And Norman would listen, and and I never had a great relationship with him, because we were kind of like, everyone was vying for Al's love. And
that's what it sounds like.
So I respected him, and I knew what he was, and therefore I never interfered, never put him down. I could have disagreed, let him do his thing, and he did.
Yeah, something we go back to too is like, I always forget, because I was young working there, and everyone seemed like a grown up to me, but these were not they were not that old running this big company.
Yep.
Like it's shocking to me that anything got done.
Al moved Norman and his team down to 23rd Street.
Yeah.
Where they opened up that, studio down there. Al thought he was going to be, Hanna-Barbera. He got consumed by his own bullshit, to use my expression.
No, that's fine. I mean, and it was innovative in that way. Like it felt like a studio campus in the middle of New York. Like It felt like we were going to Warner Brothers, to have the music there, to have the writers there. It felt like this amazing creative place to go.
Yep.
But we've heard from other people what they think the downfall of the company was. And it's a lot of what you said. I mean, it's the streaming services, it's the cable channels. But do you think it had to do with also some hubris and some mismanagement and things like that?
Without a doubt. Sometimes you become so big in your head that you basically have put blinders on, and you don't realize that everything doesn't have to be a home run. Doubles and triples are okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Doubles and triples pay the bills. And so, Al was always looking for the next big thing to basically, appease his ego. And
right.
Which, and God bless him, he did very well by it. And,
Well, not everything is going to be Pokemon. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've come to terms with that's the biggest show I'm going to work on. And that's fine. You know what I mean? Not everything is Pokemon. And I think maybe it was hard to have such a success so early because you're always chasing it then.
Yeah, no. And again, nobody knew. I mean, this was like, God, from heaven came down and said, I'm giving you this opportunity. Don't blow it. Understand.
Yeah.
And somehow,
with great power,
we did. We understood it, and we nurtured it. We really, because aside from being Pokemon, Nintendo was on the line. Remember, do me one favor: don't fail. That was
right. I mean, we spoke to Gail Tilden, who it seems like had such love for this brand.
Yep.
And I'm sure you guys worked with her.
Yeah, Gail and George Harrison at Nintendo.
You were such hard workers, and so do you think they could have survived the Lehman Brothers catastrophe? Do you think that?
No, that was what happened was Al let Joe Garrity dismiss Joe Garrity, who was relatively conservative, and Al brought in another CFO who from day one, I mean, I knew this guy was bad news. Number one, he had no prior experience with kids. He came from Manischewitz.
Oh,
he knew how to sell
the wine company. Okay.
Plus, I knew he was corrupt. He was making side deals with every vendor. So when you brought water into the company, bottles of Poland Spring, he got a piece, he got a taste. And he blinded Al, and he convinced Al to basically do the Lehman Brothers deal. And that was the demise.
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, it's questionable if they could have recovered from that because it was a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But if they, we've heard that, you weren't there still, but shows like Chaotic cost so much to make.
Yep.
And there were too many missteps. Like, they might have rebounded, but it's a shame, but we like this podcast to be kind of a lesson in business in that way. Like what you're saying, it doesn't always have to be a home run. Doubles are great,
Doubles pay the bills,
Yeah.
I'd rather have 6 doubles than maybe 1 home run because a home run has a limited lifespan, and and that limit is you don't know. You don't.
Beanie Babies.
Everything goes up. One thing about the toy business. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There have been a half a dozen products that have, defied gravity. Barbie is one of them because Barbie is a very unique product. Barbie, with most toys, I used to say there are 3 layers of acceptance. You have the child, you have the parent, and you have the grandparent or aunt or uncle who basically buy into ultimately will buy the product. With Barbie, there were 5. Barbie had the collector, and Barbie had gay men, because gay men were using Barbie as their mannequin. So Barbie had 5 layers, and they could, keep it, going. And when I forgot her name, who was running the Mattel brand at the time. Oh God, she was. It'll come to me. Anyways, she understood Barbie, and she understood that you have the mannequin and you make your money on all the ancillaries. And where Mattel made a mistake is when she left, they decided to have Barbie with the ancillary and sell another Barbie with a dress. Rather than selling the dress, 6 dresses and a Barbie, they sold 6 Barbies with dresses. And that what are you going to do with all these 6 Barbies? You only need one to dress. And they lost vision. They lost Jill Broad.
Okay.
She was a genius. She understood Barbie was her baby. That was one. And then, other things like Fisher-Price as a brand, but even things like Hasbro, if you think about G.I. Joe, ultimately came and went. Transformers, had a good run, because they had a couple of movies, but it came and went. Do you know how much business Pokemon does right now? A year?
Tell us.
$14 billion in the U.S. alone, right now.
I was gonna say, if Barbie appeals to about, was it 5 different kind of
Pokemon is up there.
Yeah, Pokemon's got to be double that, I think.
Yes, because Pokemon, the young kids that now are adults really never abandoned it. There was something special about it. Yeah, there was something special about it. It defied gravity, and you can count those products on your hands. And again, I've seen so many home runs that once you rounded the bases and hit the home plate, it was over. And what kills most of these toys is the retailers. The retailers do the killing because they have these expectations that every year you're going to sell more. And once something slows down, they need to fill the void that so they look for the next thing, and then they start to abandon, what's there.
And is that the problem of always looking for another home run and not a couple doubles?
Yeah. I'll give you another toy that was Bandai's, has, I forget the Bandai product that lasted for many, well, it wasn't Power Rangers, one of the Bandai products that lasted forever, because Bandai understood if the business slowed down, we'll slow down the manufacturing to keep the business. And so they can always find shelf space. Because the one thing, you don't want to do is put too much on the shelf, and the retailer now has to come to you for markdown money or close that money. So Bandai, was and that's why the Japanese were masterful, because they were patient. Everything doesn't have to be, it's not the mouth that eats. They're very, very patient. And so they have things that have been going for many more years than what we see in the American market. Cabbage Patch could have gone further than it went. There's been a lot of alliterations of Cabbage Patch. Coleco lost it. Mattel picked it up and really did understand it. And then it went to 2 small toy manufacturers. One was called Play Along, and now I think Jazzwares has it. But they all abandoned the idea that I'm a one of a kind. I'm a Cabbage Patch Kid. There's nobody else like me. Sell the difference. Don't sell that there's 9,000 babies and that we have passports and that we sit in first class on an airplane. I'm one of a kind. It's you and me, mommy. I am yours.
So when did you notice a shift? Because a lot of our listeners are into this stuff, anime, and they're collectors. And I didn't, at the beginning of Pokemon and these other things, I don't think they catered, even Barbie, to collectors. When did you see that shift when they're like, ooh, there's money?
Barbie was always in the collector realm. Women were collecting Barbie because it was, again, it's hard to describe as a collectible. That was really, in my opinion, the first toy that became a real collectible. And then Pokemon started the collectible business. And then these toy manufacturers realized that if you manufacture G.I. Joe, there's one G.I. Joe, you got to manufacture lots of different characters for the kids to basically collect. With like G.I. Joe, where they made their money is they sold you the cannon and they sold you the tank and they sold you the ambulance,
Right.
and they sold you 6 rifles and 2 helmets, but it was one GI Joe. It's when they were able to come up with a scheme of multiples where you need, like, it's baseball cards, it's trading cards.
But did you anticipate like the collectors who would buy 2 of each thing, one to take out of the box and one to keep in the box, like that level of collector?
Absolutely.
I mean, because that's what it is today. It's unbelievable.
I have in my home in Long Island, in my basement, I have a GI Joe in a fireman's uniform. I think they made 12 of them.
Wow.
And I have a Dennis Rodman mannequin, autographed by Dennis Rodman with his earrings and his nose ring.
Wow.
In a box.
And a world piece? Yeah.
That I've collected. I have baseball. Actually, I don't have. My sons have baseball cards from the 1980s. We have boxes of them.
Wow.
One of these days, we're going to go through and see the next mansion that we could possibly buy with this stuff.
Right.
Because they're basically mint condition, never been, rarely touched by human hands. It became.
Please adopt me.
Yeah.
Something our fans are ravenous for is any kind of lost media, or like from the 4Kids era, or someone just shared with us some of the stock reports and things like that, pictures. Do you have anything like that from the 4Kids stuff?
Well, my wife threw it all out when we moved.
Let me talk to her.
I was able to take 6 pair of underwear, 2 pairs of shorts, and a pair of sneakers. We actually downsized. We went from a house that was too big for us to a house that we can maintain. And so we, sadly, we discarded most of that stuff.
So
I had
crazy,
pictures,
right?
Time magazine of Pokémon on Time. I had them hanging on my wall in my office. There were other things, that were, associated with it. It's funny, my daughter, because my grandson, who's 5, was into it big time. My daughter found the original series of Pokemon, and at the end there's the credits, and there's my name.
Mm-hmm.
So she shows it to him. That's Grandpa, and he's like, what do you have to do with this?
Right.
Yeah.
You were there. Before we let you go, I know there's some really fascinating shows, big time shows you were a part of since your time at 4Kids. Like you mentioned, Paw Patrol. Brag a little and just tell us a little bit.
Paw Patrol was I introduced the guys from Spin Masters to the guys at the at the Kids WB and to Nickelodeon. And basically, in the background, I kind of twisted, because Nickelodeon was really hesitant about taking third-party, content, because they wanted to own the content so they could basically be, control of all of the licensing. And basically, you went to them and said, listen, we'll take care of you on the media side, and I'll convince the client to basically offer you a piece of the licensing. Might be a small piece, but it's a piece, but you got to take the show. So there's a guy at Spin Master, Adam Beater, who was their lead guy who was selling their shows. He went to Nickelodeon, and I was behind the screen, basically, pulling the strings. That was one. Bagagon, which was another Spin Master. I brought that to the Cartoon Network and said,
wow.
You need something. This is something you can't go wrong. What's the worst that can happen? After a short period of time, you'll relocate it. Don't cancel it, just relocate it. And that worked. And that was at the same time that Hasbro had another, Japanese kind of Bagagon kind of program. And it worked. I'm just trying to think some of the others that, I had I whispered. And again, when you spend $300 million a year in kid media, the whole kids media business, from movies and food and toys, is under $1 billion. We were 300 million. We are a little fart cake. We're fart cake selling with $300 million, to spend. We had a very big voice, and we always gave the network partners an out. That if it didn't work, we'll figure something out. But you got to give it a chance, because again, Jerry Sachs taught me that the next best idea is out there. It's not inside, your company, or not inside a Hasbro, or not inside Mattel. It's out there. Go find it. And that's what we did. We looked for things that we felt, we didn't take on anything. We felt that there was something there that could resonate. And we studied it. And again, I had two partners Steve Coker and Lenny Leoka, who were creative geniuses. And we'd show it to them, and they would, come back with, okay, this could go someplace. We could do something with this. And most of it worked. We had very few failures. And
how often were you focus grouping with children on these things?
All the time. But we looked at focus groups very differently. When we went to a focus group, we did it two ways. We wanted to ask the kids what they didn't like, not what they liked. What don't you like? And at the end of the focus group, we gave each kid $25. We put them in a room with all of the toys, and we said, okay, and not our toys, everyone else's toys. And let's see what you picked.
Oh, wow.
And we also did something different. We did focus groups. We did it what's called theater style, where we sat the kids side by side. So, because when you do focus group around a table, there was always an alpha in the room that could control the discourse.
Mm-hmm.
When you have them lined up, alpha is not to be seen. And so we were getting much better intelligence out of the way we did. And that's Lenny Leokum and Steve Coker's, brilliance. That's
wow.
how they looked at things. And it would be funny. We'd be standing behind the glass, watching these kids put their money down. And as much as they wanted to buy what they just were touting that so great, it was right next to it was a video game or whatever that they, you had to pull them over. So that's how we use research. We use research, an awful lot. We didn't, put everything on it. We used it as a tool. Mm-hmm. And we learned what's not good about something. Not, it's easy to find out what's good about it because they're going to bullshit you. We want to know what you don't like, not what you like.
Yeah, no, you have said this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. This is a different part of 4Kids and this whole industry that we had not gotten into yet. So I really thank you.
4Kids
Shelly Hirsch.
was a great experience, with very interesting people. Not everybody interesting, but some really great people and some,
personalities, let's call them.
Yeah,
lots of personalities.
And I owe an awful lot to just being with these other people. I learned from them. I hope they learned from me. And together, we kind of made it work.
Wow. That again, another master class in children's television and toys and advertising. Something unfortunately we stopped recording, and I asked him who handled following the ratings for the shows and making the decisions about what was worth keeping on the air. And he said Summit, his division, was in charge of distributing the ratings and talking about that stuff. So I said, why would a show, he didn't remember specifics necessarily, but I said, something like Tama and Friends, why did that disappear? Is it simply ratings? And he said, well, it could have been that, or that the merchandise did not support it. Again, we go back to toys and making money on that end of it all.
Yeah, might be able to explain a bunch of shows that kind of, had very short runs. I mean, I think for G.I. Joe, I think it's Sigma 6 is the most obvious one. It's clearly, because we know for a fact there was a toy line tied to it, and when that didn't sell well.
But I guess my question is does whose responsibility is that? Because you really have to time it out exactly so that the toys come out at the same time. Like when Fighting Foodons launched, for example, I just don't remember there being toys. So did that signal its failure, or did they not believe in it enough to make the toys? I don't know where that part of it comes in.
I don't know what's to say, because I know at least because Ultimate Muscle started airing the same time as Foodons, and Ultimate Muscle had some toys, I don't think ready to go, but within a short amount of time. I think within the start of next year, there was stuff out there.
Right, but is that too late then? If you're going off of ratings,
yeah,
and you're going off of profit from toys, like you almost like I think today everything is synced up in a more exact way, and maybe that's the difference in manufacturing today, and the difference between the way we communicate so quickly.
Yeah, because sometimes like things like Chaotic obviously was like a planned assault to say
right. That seems
strategized. Like they knew, this is meant to sell a card game. When we hear about another show we don't get to talk about as much as Mew Mew Power, and the rumor is, they couldn't secure any like merchandise or toy lines, and I'm wondering if like they was 4Kids' idea was to put these shows out first, see what sank or swam, and then go all in. Right.
So that's so interesting to me. But thank you so much to Shelly Hirsch. God, that just, again, I hope I don't know if he's done a lot of other interviews, but I hope he has, and I wish he could just go to a university and teach a class in all of this. So thank you to him. Thank you to Steve.
You're welcome.
You know what we did not mention in the intro is our links and crap like that. Don't leave yet if you are still listening, because you are not going to believe what is going to come out of Steve's mouth. Nothing just came out of his mouth. There was a big dramatic pause.
But before that, yes. Go to our website. It's 4kidsflashback.com, spelled with number 4. That's where you could find all links to all our happenings online, including over at our Patreon. It's patreon.com/4kidsflashback. Don't spell Put the number 4 in there. Don't spell it out. And if you sign up there, you get episodes week free or the week.
Oh, you did it. I love when you do that. That's my favorite mistake.
No,
I'm leaving that in.
Yeah. Oh, well. All right. Week early, ad free.
Yeah. And access to our Discord channel and bonus content and that stuff. Oh, smash that like button. I just like to say that. Subscribe, rate, and review. It really does help people find the show. It helps keep us going. I'm forgetting. Oh, merch. If you want merch with Steve's logo, go to 4kidsflashback.com and click the store or shop button. Speakpipe.com. If you want to I can't talk today. 4Kids Flashback, leave us a message and you might hear yourself on one of our shows. If just with comments, concerns, questions, maybe a memory you have of watching 4Kids. Share it with us. We love when you share. And
sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring. On that note, we will
catch you next time.
4Kids Flashback is a production of Maji Media, hosted by Tara Sands and Steve Yurko.
Producers are Zach Logan, Tara Sands, and Steve Yurko.
For more information, go to 4kidsflashback.com. That is the number 4. And if you worked at 4Kids and have a story you want to share, please email us at 4kidsflashback@gmail.com.
You can find us on social media at 4kidsflashback, and to listen early and ad-free, head to patreon.com/4kidsflashback. For podcast merchandise, find links on our website and Linktree.
As they say on every podcast, if you liked this show, please subscribe, rate, and review, and tell your friends or 4. If you want to check out other Maji Media podcasts, go to maji.media. Thanks for listening.